Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Focused Free Fit. It's your favorite coach, Coach Frank, and today we have a special guest, Scott Stanfield. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. I think it's going to be a really good discussion today. I'm excited to hear about your background. I started off in the engineering field, so I'm excited to talk about how you started off in engineering.
Excellent.
I couldn't hack it. You clearly did, so we'll talk about that. But yeah, I'm excited to see, how you got from where you were to where you are today. So, this channel is a lot for the entrepreneur and the investor and those that want to stay in shape. And so we kind of cover a lot of different topics, but I think we're going to talk about a lot of those today. So as everybody on this podcast, we always start a little bit about, tell us about your early years, tell us where you grew up, tell us about family life, and then we'll kind of go from there. Tell us about yourself.
So nothing overly, I guess, crazy or anything. I grew up in Hilliard, Ohio. That's a suburb of Columbus, and my parents were more blue collar, and really my family was blue collar. My dad worked heavy construction. My mom worked at a doctor's office. I had a great high school job. I worked at a Dairy Queen for 5.5 years, probably the best job I've ever had. The owner was fantastic. He was an older gentleman. He was a Korean War veteran, and I spent a lot of time at his house helping him with other projects, and just literally I could go work on his garden, and then he would make steak and potatoes for lunch.
Wow.
So when you're a young person and you're being fed well like that, it's
that's a good thing.
You're happy. So
yeah.
But anyways, he was a very, very nice man, very fair. Did a lot for the community. It was a great experience. I guess high school, I wasn't really the best student. I just didn't really care much. It wasn't that I didn't care. It was more I just wasn't interested in the, I guess, academics at that time. And when I graduated, I realized kind of have to figure out something. You can't just do nothing. And so that's when I got interested in really applying myself when it comes to school. I went to a university called Wright State. It's in the Dayton area. It's right by Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. And at that time, when I first started my undergraduate, I really never had success in school. So I just decided, well, if you're going to be good at something, spend all your time on it. And so that's what I did. I spent all my time studying, and I had great success. My grades were fantastic there at Wright State. And that really opened doors too. My grades were really high. I took a lot of pride in what I was doing. And so I had professors approach me and say, hey, are you working for anybody? Like, no, actually I'm not. And so that's how I got started with co-oping. And this was at the base there. So this was in the Air Force Research Labs. And the first project that I worked on was actually in the materials directorate. So my background's mechanical, but this was a little bit different, but that was good. I got to experience some other stuff. And I did that until the professor went on sabbatical. That was about 1 year. And then I literally was turning in a project. And the professor asked me, are you working for anybody? and I wasn't. And so his name was Jim Menard. And so I started working for him. It was another co-op position at the base. And that really opened a lot of roads for me. I ended up doing my PhD with Dr. Menard, a great person. Had a lot of really good people around me, very smart people, humble people. I learned a lot. And when I finished my PhD, the gentleman that we were doing work for at the time, his name was Roger Kimmel, and he was on my dissertation committee, and he asked me if I was working yet. And I told him, no, I was tired. I just hadn't really applied for work. A PhD really wears you out.
I can only imagine.
It's not just the work. If you've done one, then if you haven't, you just hear about it and go, oh, okay. But it makes you tired. And I hadn't really applied. And he had some interesting stuff that was going on. He was a nice man, smart man. And so that's how I got started with the Air Force. And I spent quite a few years there, working in the labs on all kinds of very just different projects, interesting projects, projects that you would never get to work on unless it was for the U.S. government. Nobody else has the budget to take on something like that may yield no profit. So clearly not a company that's going to do this.
You just said the key word, no profit.
Yeah, exactly. And the profit was really in just developing technology for the Air Force. So this would have been hypersonics. I was involved in a lot of flight testing and just different things like that. And so it was really interesting stuff. And that was also the first time I started having money. When you're a student, you're hungry. You don't have any extra money, and you tend to eat really cheap, just trying to save a little bit so you can pay for gas. Usually at the end of the quarter, I would go and find all my change. So I had like nickel day where I'd literally go to the gas station, just drop a pile of nickels. I need $9.85 worth of gas, please.
Yeah, that's about right.
Yeah, and that's how it goes. And then so when I started working, that was the first time I had extra money. And the first 2 paychecks I blew. I bought some just stuff for my basement. I bought a pool table, a home theater system, nice seating, a bar.
Scott, those are necessary items.
Come on. It really was.
Those are needs, not wants. Yeah, those are needs, not wants.
Yeah, I call those. Yeah, it was a need, I guess, but it was also a want. It was just nice to do something for myself like that. And then after that, I got serious, and so I started looking at how I was going to use this extra money. I wanted to invest, wanted to build something for my future, and I looked at stocks and I looked at real estate, and real estate really gravitated towards me. I liked the idea of having a hard asset that produced income. And I didn't know, really all what that meant at that time. And I really started reading and just researching it, putting together financial models to do some forecasting, etc. And that's really how I got moving. I bought properties, I guess, more the traditional way. This was, source your own deal type thing, and then self-manage, etc. And that was great, except I was working a lot of hours.
Sure.
About 60-hour weeks. So that quickly just wasn't feasible for my schedule. And so that's really how I switched directions to what I do now.
So lot to unpack, because we went all the way from being born to now you're in real estate. So
you asked for all of it, so I gave it to you.
I know. Yeah, no. Well, you got a lot going on. So it sounds like when you were growing up, normal family, parents never really talked about money. Did they?
No,
Did they talk about? Okay.
You have to have money to talk about it.
Yeah. Okay. And that's fair.
I have 3 sisters, so that
okay.
Any money you were making was really just going into supporting the family. So.
Gotcha. And what do you think changed for you? Like, obviously your parents were probably at some point at the same stage, right? And they didn't have that thought of, what do I do with my extra money? Maybe real estate. Like they skipped that. Like a lot of our parents skip that stage, or people just skip that stage. And is it because they were younger? What do you think about that? I'm just curious, because I think it's interesting that you're like, what should I do with my money? And then you just gravitated towards real estate. So was it the predictability about real estate because you're an engineer? What do you think it was?
Yeah. So first off, I'll talk about my parents a little bit. They didn't have extra money, right? Their jobs were not high earners. They had 4 kids, and so for them, looking at how you were going to invest, what never really entered the equation. You also have to look at that era, right? Most people that time felt, well, if you just get a job at General Motors, right, you're set for life because there's a pension. All you got to do is just work hard. And so there was a different mindset back then too. You didn't have this idea of entrepreneurship, this idea of really investing for something in the future. Now, some people did, but that was a small percentage. Now, I always had this idea that I wanted to at least try once to be rich. Now, I had no idea what that meant, right? And I was awfully young. I thought, well, maybe I'll just have a Subway store and I'll own that somehow, magically, or something like that. So basically, I was looking at the idea of having a business. So I was always open to the idea of, I guess, something more, even though I wasn't really looking for it, right? I just kind of did my own thing. So that's more on that first part where you were asking about my parents and their mindset. Now, with me, and I think you also asked me about. Sorry,
No, it's okay.
apologize.
What gravitate? How'd you gravitate to real estate?
Yeah, so my answer has actually changed as I've done this. So when I first got started on it, it was something I could understand. And stocks, for those who don't know, the reason why prices go up is not based on fundamentals. Everybody think, oh, well, yeah, the company's going great. Their earnings are great. I'll go buy their stock. So you do get a little bit of that. That's not really what it is. And we probably shouldn't call it the stock market. We should call it the stock algorithm. Uh,
Yeah.
Unfortunately, and I don't really want to go too deep into that. For people who are interested, they can Google and read a little bit about it. But even at that time, when I was looking at stocks, it just didn't make a whole lot of sense to me. And it really felt like buying something and relying on others. And I didn't want that. And with real estate, it's completely different. It's a hard asset. It's something you own. You have control over it. It's your business, your processes. And the end result is your earnings or your failure, right? It could be either one. And that's what really steered me that way. And now looking at it with a little bit different eyes today, there's a lot of reasons that I'm glad I went this route. When you look at real estate, it's not liquid, right? You can't just sell that on a click of a button. And some people think that's a bad thing. I love it. And the reason why I like it, real estate pricing and how it behaves, it's more supply and demand and fundamentals, right? So this is actual fundamental economic data really drives real estate. It doesn't with stocks. So stocks are a lot harder because there's this other element to it that frankly you just don't have any control over.
Mm-hmm.
And with real estate, it's slower because it's not liquid. It's governed more by fundamentals. So now it, to me at least, feels a little more predictable. And that doesn't mean you can't have a crash that you never saw coming. It's just it's something that's a little bit easier to wrap your mind around, and it moves at a speed that is just a little more conducive to what I want. I like to really think about things before I make a choice. I don't have to just look at it and be impulsive and hit the buy or sell button like if I was a day
Right.
trader, for
Yeah.
example, right? So
Yeah.
anyway, so that's really my answer on why I like real estate. Now I do other stuff just so that people realize I do write algorithms. I do trade options with algorithms. I've done that for years. It's trading now as we're talking, and not watching it or anything like that. But so I do that, but realize that's because I have an actual plan that I have tested. I know the statistics for, and it works. Um, Otherwise, I wouldn't do it.
Sure. Well, and it sounds like that fits your that fits you. Like I could see that.
Yes.
You're a numbers person, you're an engineer. That's not
Yeah.
shocking to me. But
No, I'm very numbers oriented.
for sure.
Yeah.
But you're diversifying as well. So, and I think
Correct.
that everyone should consider that. It doesn't have to be the same things you're doing, but they should diversify, even if they're in real
Yeah, they need
estate.
to diversify. You can't just be in real estate. And even if you are in just real estate, you should look at how you're going to diversify your real estate portfolio. That is very, very important.
How do you? So, let's go back to when you made that decision. So
Mm-hmm.
you say, you know what? I have this extra money. I'm going to
Mm-hmm.
put it in real estate. What do you do then? How did
Yeah.
you
So
decide where and how much you needed and all that kind of thing?
yeah. So I mean, really, the market's going to tell you how much you need. First, you got to figure out where you're going to invest, right? And you have to then have some idea of what the price points are that you're targeting. And of course, at that point, you're going to have to find the lender and that sort. And I mean, nobody's buying in cash. If you are buying in cash, you really probably shouldn't be buying in cash.
Well, you
You
eliminate your risk, but you eliminate your ROI too.
kind of.
I mean,
Actually, it's more
lower it. I should say
capital at
lower it.
risk, right? If you buy in cash, you actually have more capital at risk.
That's
Although
true.
it's a lower risk position in my opinion, right?
Yeah.
But you also expose yourself to some other things. I like having that inflation hedge with a mortgage, for example. But it is a debt instrument, and you do have to be smart how you use a debt instrument. You can very quickly get in trouble with that. And so you have to have a plan. You can't just do it willy-nilly. You have to understand the risks, and you have to, maybe put a little more money down or something like that, or make sure you source the right deal. that has the right financials and things like that. But yeah, so if you're getting started and you're looking at how you're going to get into the market, you have to figure out where you're going to invest. You have to figure out exactly what the price points are and then how much money you need to put down. And then you need a reserve fund. And so that's really the key. You need a reserve. You have to have an understanding of where you're investing and the price points and how much money it's going to take. And if you're not, well, I don't know how to figure out how much money, call a lender, find out.
Yeah. Yeah.
They'll tell you. They want to give you a loan, right? That's their business.
Yeah.
So
let me ask you a question. So it brings up a lot of questions here. Okay. So let's break it down step by step for people that may not be in the real estate game or want to get in the real estate game or maybe in the middle of this situation right now. So you brought up debt, and I think it's a good conversation to have. So you look at someone like, I'll throw an extreme case, Robert Kiyosaki out there. He's
billions of dollars of debt.
Yeah. That's his message, right? And so people hear that and they're like, okay, but he's got $3 billion in debt, and he might make $3.5 billion in income. So he's got that 500 cash flow. So, but he's like, hey, debt is good as long as it's the right debt. And I think what he's trying to say is, as long as it cash flows and you don't, you're over that number, that's essentially what he's saying. So how much debt is too much debt? I mean, everybody's got a different risk tolerance, but how do you know where that is? It's like, okay, I get one single family rental. I have $150,000 in debt. I'm cash flowing $2,000 a year, let's say. How much debt do you keep? I mean, to get financially free, that's going to take a lot of debt if you keep that process up. So what would you say to that person that's like, how much debt do I get? Do I pay every fifth property off? Like, what would be the strategy?
Yeah, so unfortunately, the real answer is not simple, and it depends on the person. Everybody has a different risk tolerance. It's that simple. And so you need to figure out how much debt is good for you. So what you really need to do is understand how to do the math, right? You need to understand the financial numbers and understand that financial model. And I know people don't like sometimes to do some math.
All the people that don't like numbers want to punch you in the face right now.
I understand. But, the thing is that there's a lot of people out there that do like numbers.
For sure.
That write calculators for you. I have one on my website, for example. It's free. And there are other people that do the same thing. Use those resources. Maybe go through it once so you understand it, and then be like, okay, I understand it, but I don't have to do it. There's a calculator. And use that as your tool. You don't have to maybe go through all the rigor that somebody else did to get that same answer. But the point is, you need to understand the financial model of the instrument you're looking at. So if it is a house, or if it is a duplex or something else, you have to understand it. And then you need to have a model that's realistic. It doesn't have to be spot on. Models are never reality. You just need it to be close enough so that you can make an informed decision. And then at that point, it's like, okay, well, there's several things that can happen. What are these different risk sources, right? And that's going to potentially strain. Maybe you don't collect rent for a month, right? What are you going to do in that situation? Well, you have a reserve fund. So how much reserve fund do you need to make it where you can sleep at night, right? That goes back to your risk tolerance. And the reality is, you can then look at how much debt you're comfortable taking on based on the numbers and the model you have in front of you. If you're, maybe you have a really good high income paying job, so it's a way to hedge your risk. You're like, well, I have a good reserve fund, plus I have this very stable job that, I'm making all this extra money. I'm more than happy to take on this debt because I know that worst case scenario, even if there's some issue with my reserve fund, I have a lot of extra income every month where I could float, my properties or whatever so it really does come down to your specific situation, your risk tolerance, your objectives, your goals, right? Your goals may not be like Robert Kiyosaki, where you're like, well, I want $3 billion worth of debt so that I can create $5 billion worth of revenue. But realize too that he doesn't just have revenue coming from housing. He has revenues coming from his education business. He has revenue coming from YouTube, his social media presence. So all these revenue sources are independent of each other, essentially.
Very true.
And because of that, it hedges his risk. So why can he take on a lot of debt? because he has revenue streams from independent sources that helps minimize his debt risk. And
100% true.
realize when you have debt like that, you have leverage.
Yeah.
And if you
No,
don't know
for
what
sure.
leverage is, read about it, because that is the key to getting rich. So
And wow, there's so many lessons from what you just said. I would venture to say also that there's nothing that happens fast.
no,
I've been doing real estate for a long time, and I realize every day something I don't know, or I learn something new, and I'm like, holy cow. And it's like that lifelong journey of learning.
it never
But
ends.
it never ends. It
No,
honestly never ends.
it really
And then
doesn't. For people thinking, oh, this guy seems like he knows so much. I might know a little more than you, or maybe less, but the reality is I don't know everything. And every day I'm learning something new, and I'm thinking about it, and I'm incorporating it into my business.
yeah,
Everybody's doing that.
yeah,
So,
it's very true. Is there anything that you would recommend? Is there any, before we leave the topic of like single family investing, and I'm assuming, let's talk about what you are investing in. Is it single
oh yeah,
families
sure.
that you're doing,
Yeah, it is, and
okay.
there's a lot of reasons for it. So obviously the barrier is lower because it takes less money to get into, right? Lower purchase price. I also just like the asset class. And so, yeah, I have a lot of single family rentals. They're located all over the country, 7 different states. I guess not all 50, but there's some states I don't want property in.
Sure.
And obviously I prefer, states that are landlord friendly. I want my manager to be able to manage things like that. But yeah, so my focus is actually single family homes, and the reason's pretty simple. That's what was good in the market when I was doing this. I always just look at the market, take what the market gives me. I don't try to force something. And so I did spend time looking at multifamily, but the price per door, it just never made sense, or at least not for my risk tolerance and my goals and objectives. Not when I could go and buy single family homes and realize I actually source my deals through turnkey providers. And I know it's a mixed bag with a lot of investors. I've done very well with that. And it's because I really, really focus on what the risks are for that strategy and how I'm going to minimize those risks. The money will come. As long as you know how to minimize the risks, everything else takes care of itself. And so I have done really, really well with that strategy, and it is single family. And will I always be in single family? No, I won't. I'll have single family homes, but like right now, I'm not buying. I'm not a buyer in this market. And I'm not buying multi either, but a time will come when I will be a buyer again. Maybe it'll be single family or it'll be multifamily. It just depends on what the market is going to give me. So
that's an interesting statement you said. Well, first of all, you made a disciplined statement, which was doesn't fit my parameters, which I love because everybody should take something from that. The last couple of years, everybody's been investing in multifamily, but there's a lot of people who are like, it just doesn't make sense. Why is everyone investing in multifamily? And I think if it doesn't work for you and the numbers you're looking for, then you just don't do it. And that's what makes investing easier. It doesn't make it easy. It makes it easier. If you have if you have your parameters, your buy box, if you will, or whatever you want to call it.
It keeps your emotions on the sideline. It makes it where you're not getting wrapped up into the deal like, oh, I got to make this work. And you realize when you set purchase criteria, you're doing that when you're not trying to buy something. You already have those set, established. And then after that, you got to stick to them. And you just simply stick to those parameters. And when you have the opportunity, take action. And that's what I've done.
Yeah. Okay. So there's a couple other things that I wanted to ask. So you mentioned before we go to the you buying property right now, we'll get to that in a second. But I'm familiar with the Ohio area. My family lives in Cleveland area. So, if you think about places all over the country, there's different strategies, right? If you're going to buy a single family, but I'm wondering if yours is similar to, hey, I want to buy a single family home in a place that's landlord friendly, whatever your list is, taxes or make sense and all that other jazz. But what about like buying under the medium price home nationally? Do you focus on anything like that, or no? You're just like, hey, if this makes sense, I don't care about the price, or no.
Yeah. So to start with, I have a whole system that I find metropolitan areas, and the system's really about economic indicators. First, I'm looking at population growth, right? So we're looking
Mhm.
at demand. Then I want to know if that demand is more likely to be renters or more likely to be homeowners, right? So now I'm looking at things like um, affordability index and the percentage of renters in a metropolitan area. And I like to have a reference. What do I use for a reference? It's a histogram of all the metropolitan areas, and then I just look at where I want my properties to be on that histogram, and I go from there to looking at is this sustainable, right? So is this going to continue going into the future? So for that, I look at job growth, right? Future job growth, recent job growth, and then also the gross domestic product. And maybe people don't know what those are, but you can look them up, and once you understand what they are, and they're not hard concepts really, you can look at that histogram and be like, well, yeah, I want the gross domestic product of the growth in that for the cities I'm investing in to be greater than the U.S. average, right? It's really not that hard. And then what you do is you end up with a list of cities. Now that I have a
Uh,
list of cities, that's how I have my cities. So for properties, then it comes down to two things. There's a couple economic indicators that I look at, but more importantly, I just look at the financial part of it. And I don't look to try to buy it below market. I know a lot of people do that. I look at having something that is rent ready, right? That's the turnkey part, and isn't going to cost me a lot of maintenance. That is, the renovations have been done well with the right type of materials, right? I want to make sure it has a new roof. All those big ticket items have been addressed. And then I'm happy buying it at the appraised value. And there's a very good reason for that. And I know that's not what they tell you, all the gurus. They tell you, shop for this house that you can buy for instant equity. I'm in it for the long haul.
mhm.
And for people who don't know, appreciation for single family homes, the historical average is about 3.8%. Well, I have a leverage position at 3.8%, which is going to be for a 20% down payment, it's about 16.5% annual. I'm
Explain
good
that
with
to
that.
people. Explain to
Yes,
people
yes.
what you just said, because I think we just lost a lot of people. So let's go a little deeper
I
here.
apologize. Sometimes I get real happy about it. I'm like, oh
That's
yeah, let's
okay.
talk. Yeah.
Yeah, but
So, no,
it's a very
let's talk
important
about
point that I
this.
want everyone to get.
Right. So this is called leverage, right? This is what I alluded to earlier. So at 3.8%, that's if you buy it in cash, all of your cash. Okay. So let's say you borrow some money from the bank. So now you only have 20% of the purchase price in from your out of pocket money that you're buying this house with. The rest of it is the bank's money. So when you get a 3.8% return, that's 3.8% of the value of the house. That would be that whole purchase price. So say $100,000. That's $20,000, right? Or I'm sorry, 3.8%. So $3,800. I was getting ahead, right?
Yeah, yeah.
The down payment is only 20,000, right? So you have $20,000 in the deal, but you just made $3,800. So divide $3,800 by $20,000. It's not going to be that yeah, it's
Well,
not going to be 3.8%. It's going to be a larger value. So
yeah, and essentially what you're saying is
yes,
you're borrowing money from the bank and then
right,
you're earning interest on that money too.
yes,
And
exactly. Yep,
just the small amount of money you're putting
yep.
down. So if the bank if you buy $100,000 home and you
Mm-hmm.
put 20,000 down, you're not just making the interest on the 20,000 you put down, you're making it on the bank's
Right,
80 that they also lent you to buy the home. So you make it on the whole 100,000.
right. And if you were to do that math, it's going to be about 16.5%.
Yeah.
And that's really the power of using a mortgage. And sometimes I get really buried in the details. Apologize to those who are listening.
No,
But
but I just want to make sure that what you're
right,
saying is gold. I just want to make sure everybody caught it because
yeah,
you
I
were
want them to
going into,
understand that
yeah.
it's so key. Like this is really how you grow your net worth. This is how your portfolio expands. Where do you think the money comes from when you go to buy another house?
Mm-hmm.
It's coming from your equity. Cash flow is covering your expenses, right? And there'll be a little bit extra if you're doing this the correct way. right? Typically, I'm getting about a 10%, 12% return on my money annually from cash flow, right? So that's also leveraged.
Yep.
I'll let
Yeah.
people, maybe look at the math on that one, or you can just use my calculator or somebody else's calculator. But the reality is it's leverage. And then there's other pieces to that too, right? When you have a mortgage, what's happening? You're taking that money, you're paying the mortgage, and part of that's going to the cost of the loan, right? The interest. But you also have another piece, and that's paying down the balance, right? And so you actually have a return coming from paying down that loan. And then there's another, silent return from these houses too, right? That's depreciation.
That's the biggie.
Yeah, and I don't know if you want me to go into that, but essentially what it does is it just lowers your taxes. And to give you an idea, let's say your house, you have a depreciation expense of $4,000. You essentially have to have $4,000 of taxable income before they're going to start taxing you, right? That's how depreciation works. So that would be essentially that profit and that loan pay down piece that I was talking about.
Well, so you have depreciation, which is lowering your taxes. You might disagree with this. I think you'll agree. Lowering your taxes is probably the number one thing to focus on when trying to build wealth. So how do you eliminate taxes in real estate is definitely one of the best ways. That, and I would say probably owning a business, the top two. I gotta believe. Would you agree?
Oh, definitely. So here's the thing about taxes. Ask anybody what their largest bill is, and they're going to be like, oh, it's my mortgage, or oh, it's child care. No, it's not. It's taxes. Taxes is your absolute largest bill, and it's not even close.
Yeah.
And so you really want to attack taxes. And for example, how I actually adjust my portfolio, how I choose how I'm going to refinance and what properties that I'm searching for after I've started my portfolio is all about lowering my effective tax rate. That's actually the parameter I care about when I'm making adjustments to my portfolio. It's not the only one, right? I'm also looking at the economy and where we're at and what I need to do that way. So there's some economic indicators. But when I'm a buyer and when I'm trying to do things with my portfolio, I'm adding properties that make sense financially that's going to help me with taxes. And that's how I choose to do it. Other people may do it differently, but
so I just find it interesting. I mean, it's definitely a strategy, and it's a consistent strategy, but your play is cash flow.
Yep.
Your play is depreciation.
Yep.
And your play is appreciation over time. Those are the three you really are focused on. And obviously the tax savings when you buy an new single family home, that helps too.
Oh, well, I wouldn't turn it away.
Yeah, sure. Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's get to the one statement that you made a little bit ago, because I'm really just interested on your take. So you said, I'm not a buyer right now. So I want to know why, and I want to know when you think you will be a buyer again, and what needs to change for you to become a buyer again.
Yeah. So I'm actually able to find turnkey properties that are profitable in this market. Not as profitable as they used to be. For example, if I look at the total return, it's about 20 to 22% per year annual, where I was buying more in that 30-35% range. But realize that, again, I don't really like those numbers well, but it is still profitable. That's not why I'm not buying. I'm not buying. In fact, the last property I bought was January of 2022. And at that time, I felt we were in the last quarter of the expansion phase of the real estate market cycle. And my parameters, that is my criteria, right, that I established before, once I hit that final quarter of the expansion phase or even going in the hypersupply, I'm done buying. And now what I'm doing is I'm focusing on getting ready for problems in the market. And so my last properties were January of 22. They were 2 new builds. They were in Alabama, actually over by Tuscaloosa. Anyways, and they've done really well. And I've actually, from being in that last quarter of the expansion phase, I still have some appreciation, about $35K on each house. So that worked out really well. And that's actually what I want. My whole goal is to get ready for a recession. And to do that, I want my loan to value ratio to go down. And I'm using that last bit of appreciation in the market that's coming with that final part of the expansion phase help push value. That's lowering loan to value ratio. Well, it's basically just debt. But essentially, I'm now down around 50% or lower. I'm focusing on saving money, building
for your
reserves.
total portfolio, you mean?
Yes.
50. Okay, gotcha. 50%
Yeah.
LTV for your total portfolio. Gotcha.
Correct. Yes,
Gotcha.
50% LTV for whole portfolio. It's actually a little lower than that, which is perfect for the current environment that we're in. And that's why I did it. It was where we were at in the market cycle. And again, I'm glad I made that choice. So at this point, I'm really just focusing on saving funds, letting my loans pay themselves down, letting that last bit of expansion with a little bit of appreciation help. Again, with my numbers, that gives me flexibility in case something does happen that I don't foresee, which is always the case.
Yeah, right.
There's always something you can't know. And so this gives me the flexibility to adjust. If I have to sell, I can still sell and not lose money because I do have that equity there. So I did refinance. I captured all those low interest rates. They're all 30-year fixed. Realize those are historically low interest rates. And so I knew get them fixed and be done with it. And so that's exactly what I did. Now, when will I be a buyer again? We have issues that need to be resolved.
Well, we know that, what I'm curious to know. So let's talk it out, because I think this is really good in conversation to have.
Oh yeah, no, I like it.
Obviously we don't know for sure what's coming. I would make the case. Yeah, you have no idea. Anybody that says they do, they're lying.
They're lying to you. They don't know.
Absolutely.
Yep.
If I had to guess, and I am nobody that should be making these kind of assumptions or guessing for the public.
You're as good as anybody else.
But
it's
if I did, I would say and I'm interested to hear what you think compared to this. I think the Fed will probably make a cut in September, which we all know is not interest rates. It's the Fed rate. They're different.
They are different.
I don't think we may hit high fives, maybe towards fall next year. But I think any time from now till we get there is a buy time. If you need a home, on the investment side, you could probably make a different case. But I'm curious to know what you think you're going to be looking for to say, okay, these changes that I want are taking place. And this is interesting because one thing we need I hate to use this word because I don't think we're having this, but like you look at like the GFC in 2007, 8, 9, right? You had millions of distressed sellers. And we don't have that now. If anything, we have a shortage. So the only way we have a big problem is if you have all these distressed sellers. Now, there might be opportunity, and that may be what you're talking about. So I'm just curious to know what you're looking for.
Yeah, so I do think there's opportunity. And if I was buying right now, I would really be buying to position myself for the next expansion.
Okay.
Right. And so I'm really looking at houses that I think would do well with the current environment and how bad the current environment could potentially get. So I would want things like 2-year leases and good cash flow and, that sort. But essentially, I would be buying to position myself for the next expansion phase. And so what's key about that? Well, you kind of hit on it already. Actually, you did hit on it already. Who here thinks we have enough supply of houses?
Yeah.
We don't. And realize that we didn't when the government said enough and they raised the Fed rate, right? They're the ones that actually created this slow-moving environment. It's government induced. It's not induced by fundamentals. Right? I mean, I guess it kind of is, right? We have these high interest rates, but not real supply and demand. There's a lot of people out there that want to be a homeowner and can't do it in this environment. And as soon as that environment changes, they're going to try to be homeowners again. So you're going to have a lot of demand. So when we get into recovery and expansion, it's going to look very different than did when we came out of the last recession, 2008, 9, right? That was when we were starting to finally really bottom out and then go towards recovery. This time, I think there's going to be a lot of expansion. So what should you look for if you think there's going to be this expansion phase of appreciation? You want to get your asset number up as high as you can, right? If you're going to apply 4% annual appreciation to a number, you want that number big. And the only way to really do that is obviously to take loans and buy
debt.
Right, debt. But now you have to weigh it against these risks. So that's why I mentioned having, 2-year leases.
That's why you said 2-year leases.
Right. with good cash
Minimizing your
flow.
risk.
You're minimizing your risk, waiting for what you think is coming in a few years. And so that's actually how I'm trying to position my portfolio to take advantage of what I think the market is doing right now. And realize this could change, right? In a week, I may have a different opinion because the market is dynamic.
Mm-hmm.
It's always changing, and you have to think about it that way and think about how you're going to include that in your business. And that's really what that statement meant, right? This is an
Gotcha.
example of us doing that. And so
Mm-hmm.
that's really what I'm looking at. And so am I a buyer? Well, yeah, if somebody came to me and said, "Hey, I've got this house that's appraising at some wonderful number, 300K, but I just don't want it anymore, and I'll sell it to you for this." And it's
Yeah.
going to cash flow like that. When I do the number, I'm like, well, yeah, I guess I am a buyer in this market. So there are
Yeah.
always opportunities out there where I could be a buyer. I'm just not actively looking for them. Instead, I'm focusing on some other stuff that I think is important right now. When
Would
will
you?
I be a buyer? Because you asked that question too.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm trying to hit all your questions.
You're doing good.
I'm just slow.
I have a bad habit of asking 5 questions at once.
Oh, I like it.
Um,
I can keep my head on it, and if I forget a question, I'll just ask.
yeah.
Um,
Do you think interest rates is enough? I mean, I would say the job market needs to be like right now. The difference I see is, rates have, I said this a couple months ago, though, to a lot of my coaching clients. I said, I could make the case that rates go down and you don't see a crazy frenzy because other things people are feeling it in the
oh, they're
economy in other
feeling it.
ways. So they're just
Yep.
not running to buy a house.
Yeah.
But if that changes, I think that if inflation comes down or whatever you want to call it, it gets easier for people out there. That and low interest rates, that's
Right.
the storm we want.
Right. I mean, I guess there is some softening, right? Commodities are actually dropping in price right now. And for those who don't know, that may not be a good thing.
That's
actually,
right. Yeah.
But I don't know if I want to open that can of worms. That's a pretty big side tangent. But essentially, I lost track of what I wanted to say there. Apologize.
No, I was just talking about like if things get better, like in the economy and rates go down, that's what we're looking for. Because rates have come down, but
rates
there's a lot of people still on the sidelines.
But look, there are so many potential catalysts for problems that are there waiting that have to be resolved.
Yes.
There's office space, there's retail.
That hasn't really even hit its stride yet.
No, it hasn't, and it's going to. And that's exactly why I'm not buying. And those are some of the things I'm waiting to see. I want to see resolution on these big issues and realize I'm maybe in a different spot than other people. I have a portfolio. It is performing. It is well positioned. I don't really want to be aggressive. I'm happy with where I'm at and letting time kind of sort these things out.
I think that's a good point.
Yeah, and and again, it goes back to taking what the market gives and looking at what you have and just positioning yourself. And so yeah, that's one of the things I'm looking for, though, right? I want to see some of these potential catalysts resolve themselves out. I want to see maybe if we do go into a full-blown recession, realize that you're going to see a lot more than a 0.25% drop from the Fed if we get into a true recession. They're going to try to stimulate the economy. So if I start seeing rates coming down and coming down hard, now I'm going to start smiling because it's now people are going to be afraid to do stuff. But what's really happening is we're going to get into expansion. And I'll give you a great example that most people are going to be familiar with. What happened during the pandemic? Government went to wartime spending levels. What resulted? A major expansion. So if we do get into a recession and the Fed does start dropping the rates and dropping it aggressively to stimulate the market, what they're really doing is they're infusing cash into the market, and that will lead to an expansion. And so at that point, I know recovery is really just right around the door. And I'm going to start really pricing stuff and looking aggressively for houses that are going to help get my asset number up. Right. So that's the value of my assets that I can take advantage of that expansion. And so that's really what I'm doing. That's when I'm going to be a buyer again, and currently what I'm looking at.
So I heard you mention one earlier, but I wouldn't be a good host if I didn't really drive a little bit harder and say, hey, Scott, what are the top 3 markets you would actually like to buy real estate in?
I actually really like Arkansas, and nobody is thinking about that. But so Little Rock, it's a state capital, so you have government jobs. If I'm worried about a recession, and I'm mentioning it because if people are looking to buy, I do like state capitals in this environment because you do have government jobs along with some other industries.
That's an interesting point.
Yeah, and those jobs tend to be very stable when the economy takes a downturn. And remember, you're supplying housing, right? So your product is, housing, and you need demand. You need people that still have money that can pay rent and can, so I do like state capitals. I think if I was buying right now, I would look for state capitals that have upside. Why Arkansas? It's still in that Sun Belt. And if you start to look at some of the population growth and that sort of and economic growth, it really looks like it's at the beginning of maybe doing something good. And to give you an example, think about like some of the other Sunbelt areas that have already, everybody knows about them, right? Texas has been crazy, right?
Florida,
Arkansas, Alabama, obviously Huntsville's already pretty hot, but there are other areas in Alabama that are getting ready to, I think, really expand. And so I would focus there so that when you get into maybe what will be a great expansion, right, when we get to this next expansion phase, you're going to be in markets that are really kind of at the bottom and ready to really take off, and realize that the price points here are still lower than other places. So the cash flow is going to be there while you're being patient, waiting for this appreciation.
Interesting. I have a buddy who's doing a lot of land tax deeds in Arkansas.
Okay.
So interesting you say that.
Yeah, so those are two of my favorite markets, and I have others obviously that I look at, but those are two that are really on my radar, and I have property in both states. So full disclosure, I am there. I am invested there.
Yeah. Well, even in Ohio, I think there, Austin, Texas has been really a hotbed. Yep. That's been for a while.
I wouldn't touch it. It's too hot.
Well, even with a 20-30% dip late in the last 6 months to a year.
Yeah.
You still wouldn't?
No, no, let me back up. If I could find something that made sense.
Okay.
Problem is everybody is going over that market hard and looking for stuff.
Gotcha.
And so I got to compete with that, and it's hard to do that. So,
well, if you don't have to and you can go to some place that's not on the radar, then that makes sense.
And that typically is how I prefer. I don't want to get into a bidding war. And so that's why I try to avoid those extreme growth areas. You get into this auction price modeling, sticking to my criteria. I know that I'm going to be sending out tons and tons of offers and never winning.
Yeah.
So I just prefer to avoid that. Like I said, I can go somewhere else and get the property that I want. And even if Texas goes bananas, right, and there's all this appreciation, and realize that so long as I'm in a good area, I'm going to be riding on the coattails of it anyways.
Sure.
The rest of the areas, the whole country, if it's a good, decent area, is going to come up with it. That's just how markets work. So I'm fine just riding the coattails, I guess.
Yeah, right. Well, hey, they both pay. So let's kind of wrap up with, tell me about, I know you're big on checklists. I would call that, I would call that SOPs, which is basically the same thing. So
it is.
What would you say is a checklist that, it doesn't matter where you go, in state, out of state, whatever your market is, is there a specific checklist? What is it that you're like, hey, these are the most important, this is for the framework if you're going to buy, what's the checklist we're talking about?
Yeah. So for evaluating a house, evaluating a problem, I have checklists for all these different processes.
Okay.
And there's a lot of reasons for them, right? I don't want to forget something, right? And I also, as I learn something, maybe I realize I make mistakes, make a lot of them. What's crucial about the mistakes is that I learn from them. And how do I make sure I don't, repeat them? I come up with a criteria and I put it in my checklist. And so that's why I use checklists. It's basically just a working version of my business plan. That's really what it is. And so you asked me for some key components to that. And so, again, for evaluating which metropolitans I want to invest in,
yeah, I guess that's not a fair question because it's pretty broad.
Oh no, that's all right. We'll just narrow it down, and then I'll it, or try to.
Well, first, before you give us, I'll refine it. But where can they go? We'll to get the checklists for all of these? If they go to your website, can they buy your book? What's the best way to get those checklists? And then I'll have you refine one of them.
Yeah. So right now, the only way to get all of them is through my book. And it won't stay that way. It's just I'm one person. So I'm trying to create educational videos that I can put on YouTube. So it's just free so people have access to it. I just, I've recorded a few and I'm getting ready to record a bunch more. For those who are looking for entertainment, this is not entertainment. These are very dry PowerPoints. I've got them illustrated so that the concepts flow well and you can visually see them, right? So that I think that really helps learning, but they're geared towards learning, right? I want to teach this and I'm not charging to teach it.
Yeah.
You need your money to invest, but I do sell a book. So right now, all the checklists are available in the book, along with how they came to be, all the detail that goes into, maybe more detail than somebody wants, but I would be doing a disservice if I didn't put all that information in there. So
what's the book called? And we'll put the link in the show notes, but what's the book called?
Yeah, the book is called Passive Profits, The Turnkey Rental Investor's Guide. You can go to my website. You can find it there. It's a little cheaper there. You can also go to Amazon. It's on Amazon. So it's really however you would want that book.
Cool.
If you were to go to my website, there are resources there, blog articles that are covering a lot of this. And I'm using the blog as a way to, because again, the market's dynamic, is a way to update the information as the market changes. I haven't gotten to that part just yet. I've released about 21 blog articles so far, and that's been more geared towards just fundamental information for the business, but realize my goal with that long term is to get more into current events and really keep things up to date with what's going on in the market. And then obviously YouTube, I have the channel, I'm uploading videos, haven't uploaded them yet, recording them, and this will help you find these checklists. And I'll go through all the detail that went into it. And I'm actually really looking forward to seeing the comments come back. What can I learn to help, not just help other people, but help me? There's smart people out there that have thought about this problem in a different way. And I'm really looking forward to seeing what people say. There may be topics I never even thought about that now I can go and read about and learn. So for me, it's great too. And so that's really how you can learn more.
We won't even refine it. I think I'll just let people go get the book if they have questions about, because there's so many and I don't know who, everyone's going to be different to everybody, but I will say having a checklist for what you do is the only way. You got to have a system and a process, and that is one. And it keeps you on track from one, doing the right things every single time in consistency.
Yes.
And then you just adjust it if you want to change it or update it. So
right. And even outsourcing, like if you don't want to do that activity anymore, how are you going to bring somebody in who doesn't know anything about it and train them? You're going to provide them a checklist. And if you put a person under a system like that, now they can perform it. And what's the end result going to be? The same as you would have got, because you have this rigorous guidelines that you're utilizing, or these action items that are in your checklist. So there's a lot of value to it.
Love it. Love it. Any parting words of wisdom for the audience on anything real estate that you would leave with them before we end? Yeah,
right now is a great time to be learning. Maybe not investing, learn, and then once you're ready and things are right and you see an opportunity, don't analyze it to death. Take action. That's really what you got to do, and you can beat a problem to death forever, but eventually you have to actually take action. So take action, and you don't have to do this all on your own. There are so many places you can go and get information. You can email me, for example. If you go to the website, email me. I answer emails, and I answer all emails. So if you have questions, ask. Go to message boards, ask. There are RIA groups in every city. Join. Ask. You don't have to go about it doing it the way I did with the niche I selected. I went that way because it fit with my resources and the times that I had. Just get started. Just try to figure out how you're going to include that in your day-to-day life. Whether you're going to meetings or not, learn, and then realize that at that point, opportunities are just going to present themselves. So
I agree. I would say, I mean, I took from what you just said, action, take action,
Yeah,
but
I got
also,
windy.
no, it's true though. I mean, that was a piece of what you said. And I
Mm,
also think I would add to what you said, which is you got to do the practice. You got to put the work in first, which you're saying learn and
yeah.
study. And I agree. And it's practice those deals, like find deals on the internet, find deals that are out there, and then
Mhm.
work the numbers so you know that when the time is right, you will know when that deal presents itself because you know what
Yep.
it looks like. But if you don't know what it looks like and you don't go out
You'll
and
never
practice it
see
and
it.
apply it, you'll never know.
You'll miss the opportunity. And
Yeah,
thing is about life, you don't get a lot of opportunities, like real opportunities. You have to figure out how you're going to really see them, and then when they do present themselves, you got to pounce on
totally agree. Good stuff today, man. I appreciate you being on. We'll put the links in the
it.
show notes, and might have to have a part two here, man.
Hey,
We got
I'm all
lots we
for
didn't
it.
touch on.
Yeah, I mean, if people come back with feedback and questions and they want to see something, I would love to do this again. I think it would be great, especially if we're reaching people and and it's something that can help them.
Heck yeah, I agree. Awesome. All right. Well, everybody, we'll catch you on the next episode. Scott, thanks for being
No,
here,
thank
and
you. Thank you very much.
yeah, absolutely. And we'll catch you guys on the next episode. All right, everybody. Bye.
Thank you.